Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture of ENG443. I'm going to give today's lecture on uploading your simulations to nanoHUB and also doing batch execution of CompuCell simulations. As usual, the class is being streamed and live streamed to YouTube and recorded for later. So let's begin. Share your screen. Okay. So, as I mentioned, two topics for today: deploying your tools in nanoHUB and batch execution. Batch deploying on nanoHUB is a straightforward process, even though it has many steps and can be finicky at times. That's why we have a template GitHub repository and a script to make life easier. And batch execution is also made easy with some GitHub repository and taking use of IU's high performance computing capabilities. So, starting with nanoHUB, you need a few things. That's why the homework was a bit different. You need a nanoHUB account, surprise, GitHub account to host your tool and communicate with nanoHUB. Let me check the share. Yeah. To have some sort of interface with GitHub, I use Git Bash. You can use Git Desktop or anything else. You need to configure Git Bash. Is that visible? Yes. And to have your CompuCell simulation, of course. And also be able to run Python from the command line. So worst case scenario, you would go to your CompuCell installation directory, find the Python exe there, and call that Python. But I have my conda up here, so I'll use that. Or if you have Python in your command line, that works, whatever. Okay, so here are the steps, 15 easy steps. As I said, it is finicky at times. First, you need to fork the template repository that I've built a long time ago now to have CompuCell3D tools on nanoHUB. And I've just pasted the link for it in chat. Then get that repository on your local machine. Then we are going to test the script that actually builds the tool and set up some intermediary files that nanoHUB expects. Then a critical point comes of choosing a short handle for the tool, and that cannot be changed, but people are not going to really see that handle, so you shouldn't worry too much about it. Then we're going to use the script to generate the in-between files and populate the repository, commit everything back to GitHub, push everything back up, make sure that 2 files in the repository are executable. I've tried to make that part automatic, but so far I failed. I did some changes last week that maybe finally fixed everything. And then we are going to go to nanoHUB and start that side of things with creating a new tool, filling in the nanoHUB form, and so on. Then some steps that I'm not going to go over in class because I've built too many dummy tools on nanoHUB, and since they get a DOI, they cannot be taken down. So nanoHUB is already not happy with me about that. So I can't do that anymore. But you will make a landing page, tell nanoHUB that everything is ready to be installed. And you need to issue nanoHUB a ticket saying that your tool needs to be on a specific systems of theirs. Yes.
I have just Where are the slides exactly
I made an announcement in Canvas.
in the files folder, right?
No, it was a pure announcement. My bad.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can also send that via email real quick.
Okay, and now I found it.
Yep. So the files, the slides are in the announcements page in Canvas. People are looking for that. So after you tell nanoHUB that they should install stuff, the tool goes through a manual process of approval, so it can take a few days, and you can then test your tool actually online and check that things work. So throughout all of these steps, your tool will not be public on nanoHUB. It will only be made public after you tell nanoHUB to make it public. So don't worry if you have an empty simulation, or if you're gonna change everything about your tool later on. Everything is changeable except for the short handle that nobody's gonna see anyway. So you should be fine. And after you're happy with it, you can give the go-ahead to make it live. And even after you're live, you're still able to make changes and publish new versions of the model. So you can still change everything. And your tool gets a DOI, so it is a publication. But with a DOI, it means that it will be forever online. So first, fork the template repository. Let me get Firefox here. So first things first, you're gonna go to this page on GitHub. This is a template repository, so you can make as many copies or fork of it. And you're gonna look for, I have Firefox minimized, so it's not gonna show me properly. You're gonna look for the big green button, use this template, and then create new repository. Make it short here again. Give it a name. I'm gonna call it CC3D Spring 23. You should probably make it something relevant to your project. You can give it a short description, make it public or private. For publishing in nanoHUB, it has to be public. Just FYI. Do not include all branches. There are just some legacy stuff in one of the branches that we are not going to need. And create repository from template. GitHub is going to take a couple seconds to create the repository. Then we are going to go to the next step, which is to actually get it from GitHub into your local machine. So to do that, you're going to go to your fork repository, and you can know that it is a fork repository because it's going to have your GitHub username, the name you give in the repo, then generated from that template repository. And now you're again going to look for the green button, but this time it says code instead of what did they say, use this template, I believe. Yep, use this template. So you're going to go to code, and it's going to give you some options to clone the repository to be local. I will use SSH because I already have it set up, and it is a bit more convenient after the setup than doing through HTTPS, but it requires more setup than HTTPS. So I'm gonna hit this double block thingy, which is copy. And now I'm gonna go to my GitHub interface, which I have it here. I'm gonna go to the place I want to clone to. which in my case is going to be on the, oh, nope, I'm not on my desktop. It's going to be on the C drive. Gonna create a new directory for a class. And I'm gonna clone with git clone and the link that I've copied from GitHub. You can just hit enter now, and it's gonna create a folder for the repository, or you can hit space and type in some string like repo. And in that case, it's gonna clone things into, it's gonna create the folder and clone everything into that folder. So in this case, it would create repo and clone everything into repo. But that's optional, and I'm not gonna do it. So I'm just hitting enter, cloning there. Since I'm using SSH, it's asking for my passphrase. There we go. So now we see that we have that folder there. Easier. I'm gonna go in, and we can see that besides changing the folder, it showed up master here. That means that I'm on the master branch of the repository. And if I got a list of what's in here, we can see that it is the same content as in the repository. Bin, middleware, attributes, etc., etc. Okay, so we got things to be local. Cool. Now, we have this toolmaker.py here, which is the script that generates, well, changes middleware scripts, generates more things, files that nanoHUB expects. You cannot just dump a .cc3 file there and expect nanoHUB to work. So I'm gonna go to my Python console here and go to that folder, which was here. Okay. Yep. And I'm gonna call on toolmaker.py. Spits out some explanation on how to use it. So the way to use it is Python toolmaker.py, just as I did. Then the short tool name or short handle, the full path to, well, it says new directory. I should probably update that to be full path to this repository, since that's that is still old from an old method. Nowadays it's easier. So full path to this repository, because here's where you're going to place the simulation and whatnot, and full path to where the project is. So I'm gonna look for a, where's my file explorer? I'm gonna look for a CompuCell simulation. I have one here. So say I have a project about foams. That's something you can do with CompuCell. And I want to get that up. Well, scroll up where I have many things.
I will get that. Thank you.
And feel free to stop me anytime. I should probably give people a few minutes to get in to this point. Yeah, so before we go ahead, I'm just gonna repeat the steps to this point. So what we did was we created a fork of this repository, which is here. And then we cloned this repository with git bash with git clone URL. And I got the correct URL from the green button here. You could use HTTPS or SSH. I used SSH, but HTTPS is probably a bit easier to start with. Then I came here and did that. I pasted the command in chat if you need it.
Probably could do that.
Mm-hmm. So the template repository is also in chat. I can send it again if needed.
Actually, I think just on the first one, for some more. No. See how many people.
Hmm.
Know what I mean?
Yep. Sorry? Yeah, that's the point we are at. So what I did was I navigated in Conda to that folder and I just issued Python 2 maker to get it to spit out the how to use. So somebody CD.
But then what's the directory?
Well, where was the cloning done?
Oh, yeah.
So somebody needs help. Yes. So when you do the git clone, it's going to create a directory with the same name as the git repository. So in my case, it's CC2D Spring 23. But in our case, it's going to be whatever you want. But if you don't want the directory or the folder to be called the same as the repository, just press space after the URL and type whatever you want. And then it's going to create that folder and put everything in there.
So why you have first made a repository when you just fork it? I missed something.
Right. So we created a fork from this template.
Yeah.
Because this template is mine.
Yes.
And only I can change it. But you are going to need your own repository for your tool for nanoHUB.
But at that point, have you not have you made a fork or have you generated a repo?
Well,
Made a fork.
well, I did use this template, create a new repository, which is the same as creating a fork.
Okay.
Yeah, you created a fork of
Because
my
I
fork.
did the real fork before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm there. Fine.
Yep. Tomato. It's just that.
Old-fashioned.
Yep. Yeah, I made this a template because, well, I had to use this many times, and you can only ever have one fork of one repository, unless it is a template.
Thank you.
Yep. And in case you ever do a second CC3D tool, You got that. Okay, let me launch that tool once more.
Can I quickly share my screen?
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
I tried this command.
So you're doing it through SSH. Try to do it through HTTPS. So when you have the green button clone, it should say HTTPS, SSH, and SCL something.
So I type the same thing from the HTTPS code.
Yeah, you do git clone, and then instead of being git at GitHub, it's gonna be something different. Gonna be HTTPS. Yeah, that. See if that works.
No, yeah, she had my copy right at this. It's still not it. I think.
No. Yeah, that's.
Actually, really, there's something not in the code.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let's okay, cool. Everybody got it cloned down to your local machine. So now if you are on a Unix system, Python is most definitely already in path. Windows, not necessarily. For instance, in this computer, I don't think I have Python in my path. So if I try to do, where did my command prompt go? Here. So if I try to do Python on a Windows command window, yep, it opened up the Microsoft Store. So I could either change my environment, my path variables and whatnot, and get Python to be there, blah, 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 blah. Or since I already have Conda, I open the Conda command window instead of Windows. Third option would be to navigate to CompuCell's install directory, launch a command window there, and then execute Python exe there. And I'm giving, I guess I'm giving Linux and Mac people more reasons to hate Windows, which fair enough. So in Conda, I can do Python, and I've navigated to where, oops, to the folder where I have cloned the repository. So I have, well, here, not ls, and I have toolmaker there. And so if I do Python toolmaker, it's gonna complain that I'm not using it right and tell me how to use it. So it expects 4 arguments in order: the shard tool name, the full path to this repository, and the full path to the CC3D project you are trying to put on nanoHUB. So a little bit about that. The shard tool name needs to be 3 to 15 alphanumeric characters, no spaces, no special characters. I think you're supposed to be able to use underscore, but I've had an issue with that before, so don't. Yeah, just stick to letters and numbers. And this handle or tool name will be part of the URL of your tool. So people are going to be able to see it, but nobody's going to pay attention to it. So if I go to nanoHUB and open up a tool, I can show what I mean exactly. There we are. So if I open CompuCell's main tool, there, nanoHUB org tools CC3D base 4x. So the tool name of the base CompuCell 4 tool is CC3D base 4x. So it is visible, so don't put anything silly, but nobody is ever going to actually see it. So don't worry too much about it. Okay, so let's actually issue the command. I'm gonna go back here. I'm gonna type in Python toolmaker. Then I'm gonna copy the folder I'm in there. And now I'm gonna find a CC3D project and paste that in there. Oh, right. All that talk about the short tool name, and I forgot about it. Is that less than 15 characters? The script is gonna know. Yeah, but yeah, actually, let me check if the script is gonna know. 10, 11, 16, and hit enter. Yeah, nice. So if you type in a tool name that it is too big, the script is gonna check for that and ask you to correct it. And if it is too short, same deal. So Python toolmaker py short handle the full path to the current folder and the full path to the folder that contains your simulation CC3D file.
Is the folder that has the CC3D file or to the CC3D file?
To the folder that has the CC3D file.
Okay.
So if I do, yeah, let me cancel this and let me just do it. So my C foam folder has foam.cc3d and simulation in it. And I think the script is only going to copy the CC3D file and the contents of the simulation folder. So if you have extra stuff in the simulation folder, it's going to get copied. If you have extra stuff in the folder containing the .cc3d, it's not. So let me get this command back. Oops. What happened now? Nice one. Maker.
What means new directory? It clones.
What means what? Sorry.
Who talks to new directories now?
Yeah, it's the instruction says full path to new directory, but I should update it to say full path to this repository. Yeah, so if I hit enter, cool, it works. So it printed a bunch of things that it did. First, it copied the contents of foam into the main folder in this directory. Then copied a bunch of extra stuff. It has a bunch of unable to copy warnings because it's not a new directory. It's already existing directory, but that's fine. Because then it renames some files to be, before it was bin tool name sh, now it's been your tool name .sh, and it updates that file. Didn't work? Okay. Let me relaunch that pool.
So if we want to make like upload something new to nanoHUB, we have to reclone the directory. And
If it is so if you want to update something new to nanoHUB and it is 100% new in the sense that it is a separate tool, yes, you do all the steps again. But if you have an update to a tool that already exists, what you would do is go to, let me open this folder in, so say I finish the steps that we are going through and put this tool that I'm creating now, CC3D Spring 23 on nanoHUB, and then I have updates. What I would do then is come here on main, which has the CC3D stuff, and edit it here. And you don't need to do the other steps. You only would then need to, commit the changes, push them on GitHub, and let nanoHUB know that you have an update for them.
So nanoHUB will sit directly in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
nanoHUB does pull it from the Git repo.
So more or less, you can directly develop in this repo.
Yes.
For now.
Yes, you can use this repo as your development location. And since you're doing group projects, it's already a good idea to do it on Git anyway. So kind of forcing good practice on you all. So you don't need to download this simulation from anywhere. I just used it because it was a simulation that I had on a short path on my computer already. You can use any .cc3d, any CC3D simulation, including the ones that come included with CompuCell for demonstration purposes. And it doesn't matter at all for the example. I'm not gonna even look into the simulation. I can later, but it's not part of the exercise. Okay, so we are almost done with the non-nanoHUB steps of the process. And we got things working there. Well, we did this already. Now we need to actually tell GitHub, hey, we changed stuff. Got those things back online. So if I go back to git bash and do a git status, I see a whole lot of red there. And that just tells me of the changes in file status from this repository. So it tells me that this file was deleted, which is true in a sense. It was renamed to this. Then main now exists. It didn't exist before. And that this file was modified. I could check the difference of all the files individually. For instance, if I do git diff for difference there, I can see what happened. The line that had toolname.sh -t blah 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 got renamed to spring23.sh -t spring23. And would you look at that? That's the renaming that happened to this file. And the toolname appears once more there. So this is guts of nanoHUB and stuff that it expects. It has no relation with CompuCell or anything. If you do any nanoHUB tool, it's going to expect a script of this type. So now to actually, we need to add all of these changes. Well, yeah, that's the status. We need to tell Git to track all of those changes or to add those changes. So we do git add, and you could do star for everything or period for this folder here. In this case, it's all the same. Throw some messages about end of line characters that you don't need to worry about. And now if I do a git status again, see a whole lot of green. Now GitHub actually realizes that that file that got deleted was actually renamed. And it tells me that there's a bunch of new files and that there was one modification. Before it was in red because they were changes that weren't tracked. And now it's green because they are changes that are tracked. Yes, you seem in trouble.
No.
Okay.
Saved my life.
Okay.
I removed something that it doesn't.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so now we've told GitHub about the changes, but they are not yet online. To do that, first we need to do give Git a commit message. Every change in Git for good practice reasons need to be justified. And if we have time afterwards, I can show a, in my opinion, funny video about that. So git commit -m for message. Then some string. I'm gonna use my suggestion from the slide, getting the tool started. So string, hit enter. That actually creates the commit. Now, finally, I can get those changes online by doing git push. And passphrase. Oh, and I see that everything worked there. Let me just put those commands in chat. Make your life easier. Oops, where did my mouse go? There. What I want. Oh, now those things should all be online. Let me do a git status. Doesn't cost me anything. And we see that my branch is up with origin master. Origin meaning online. And if I go to the online version here, this one, Yep, my fork. We see that in this page, there is no main folder, while there is here, right? And if I were to look, why? There. And if I were to look at bin, it would still have the old name, blah, 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 because I haven't hit refresh. So now, the main folder appears. And when it finished loaded, yeah, when we see the new commit message where changes were made, and that the changes were made 2 minutes ago. So Git is great. Git is life. If you do a mistake, you can go to your commits and revert stuff to the past. Way nicer than Google Drive or something. Or naming your folders v1, v2, vfinal for real, vfinal for real, and so on. So yeah, use GitHub or some other Git platform. Yeah, so changes are online, all good. So, oh yeah, one final thing before we go to nanoHUB. There are two important files that nanoHUB is gonna have to execute. The shell file, the shell files in bin. And I've told my script a million times to keep these files executable, but it seems that I'm yet to make it actually work. So if it were executable, it would say so at this corner here. Great. And also the middleware file should be executable. Let's check that. This one kept the executable. Maybe because it's not a shell file, it keeps it, and the ones that should keep it do not. Anyway, so to fix that, for Windows people, if you try to do this on Windows command line, good luck. I've tried to see how to do that once, and no. Or, and that's why I told you to install Git Bash, use some Bash interface in Windows. Git Bash, Ubuntu, you can run Ubuntu inside Windows without having to do a dual boot or anything. Pretty fun stuff. So to make those executable, we do git update dash index dash chmod equals plus x for executable. Then bin, the folder bin, everything in there. Yeah, one more reason for Linux. It kept the execution permission for some reason. So I do that, hit enter, and doesn't look like anything happened. We can check on that later. And the other one is going to be middleware invoke.
I think the problem is that you have 775 mission and not 777 mission. And it shows on the executable one at 777.
Okay. Remind me tomorrow.
I'll do that.
Okay, so now if I did those two commands to update the permission, and if I do a git status, I see that those files were indeed modified. Strange. I could swear that it would tell me that it was a change in permissions or whatever.
No, you're right. It changes. It didn't change in Linux, but it changes in Mac.
Okay. So now I do, again, I need to.
Can you please give me an LSL in the bin folder?
Hmm?
Can you give me an LSL? Just to see. Yeah. Okay.
So Again, I need to change add the changes. So git add period and give them a commit message. Run perm or run permission. Now I see that it was a mode change to 755. And git push. And again, my passphrase. Now, yeah, I'm gonna take a minute to give people time and ask if people need help and how are people doing. Am I going too fast? Too slow? Feel free to say anything. Would it be helpful for me to repeat the steps? Okay. So, where's my mouse? Here. Let me go back to, okay. So we did the creation of the setup for the files with Python using Python toolmaker short handle, the repo path, full path, and the path to .cc3d file and therefore project. We hit there that it copied all the files, renamed some files, and changed the content of several files. So those were a bunch of changes to the repo folder that we then needed to get online. So immediately after doing the toolmaker call, we came here and we added all the changes with git add. Then we've committed the changes with a message, git commit -m message. And we got the changes online with git push. Then we saw that the changes indeed were online, and we checked on 3 files that nanoHUB is going to have to execute: middleware invoke, and bin cc3d count sh, and bin spring 23 sh. And we noticed that the invoke file says executable file right there, and the other 2 do not. And if you just tell nanoHUB to install your tool, they're going to do it, and then they're going to send back a message saying, hey, this file needs to be executable, fix it, with no further explanations. So to fix that, we went back to git bash, because it's way easier to do it in bash than Windows command. And we've updated the file permissions for those files. And to update the permissions, there are a couple of ways. In here, we are using git update index. You could read that as update permissions, -- chmod, which is the usual Linux command to change permissions, =+ for adding a permission of =+ x. So we're adding x to the modifiers, I guess, for mod, for mod. And x is the execute permission. R is read, W is write. And so if you want to make a file readable but not writable, so uneditable, you could do chmod equals minus W. And then the file cannot be written to ever again until you add back the W permission. So after we've added the permissions to the two bin files, which I'm doing here, so I'm doing bin and then everything in bin, which is just the two sh files. And same thing for the invoke file, which I didn't have to do because it already had run permissions, but doesn't cost me anything. We again needed to add those changes to GitHub, make a commit for the changes, and push them online. Does that make sense? And Git is always like that. Make a change, check that you didn't break anything, add your changes, make a commit message that is not, I mean, you could, but you shouldn't just do this. I mean, sure, it's gonna work, but if you are ever on a big project with many people, the others will not be happy because you're not saying what the hell you're doing with your changes, right? So we try to be a little bit specific with our messages. Where did the message go? Anyway, so the message was changing run permission or something like that. So now if I go back to the online deployment of the repository, we can see that now there are 3 commits, before it was 2. And we see that main in middleware, the commit was 13 minutes ago, which was the initial commit, putting everything there. And bin had a commit 7 minutes ago, which was adding the execution. So if I make this larger, it should, yeah. So there we get the message, run permission. And we are doing some stuff that is not good practice, like using the master branch of the repository directly, which is frowned upon. But it's good enough for class. Okay, so we are done with the yep, we did all of that. Hey, yeah, everything is online. Oh, yeah, I went back on the slides. Okay, so we are done with the non-nanoHUB side of things. Now we need to go to nanoHUB. So to deploy a tool in nanoHUB, let me go to the main page. Would you be able to say where here you'd create a tool? Maybe publish. Yep, that would make sense. But say you're on your dashboard. Well, I think they changed the thing up top. Okay, it's better than it was. Before they had a tools menu here, and you'd think it would be in tools, but no, it is in publish. Publish, upload, publish. So we are gonna publish a resource. Yeah, resource. Let me make this smaller. Then we go all the way down, and you can see that you can publish all sort of things. In our case, it's going to be tools. That's the direct link. Yeah. So toolname. Now you see why I kept using toolname instead of handle before. Because toolname here must match exactly the handle that you selected before. Otherwise, nanoHUB is not gonna know what scripts to call, and things are just not going to work. Good thing is that if you make a typo here, you can still change the toolname everywhere else in the scripts, but you're not going to be able to change it in nanoHUB. So I did select for my tool. I can check the name that I selected by going on bin and then spring23.sh here. Or even better than that, if I go to here. So if I go to the sh file in my GitHub repository, the toolname that I selected was, wait, this sh file? Oh, sorry, not the sh file, my mistake. If I go to the middleware invoke script, the toolname must be whatever is after the -t here. So in my case, it would be SPR23. So I'm going to copy that there, and place it on nanoHUB. But say I'm just doing it this by hand without checking. I'm sleepy, it's 1 a.m. and I think I did Spring instead. In that case, you'll never again be able to change this after this step. But you can go to your GitHub repository of the tool and change it there. So I would change this to Spring, and I should be fine. So back here. So SPR23. Then this is the only thing here that you'll never again be able to change. Everything else you can. So title, you can put in a working title and change it later. That's fine. At a glance, so a one sentence abstract of your tool. You can also change that later. Screenshot size, that's, you know that in CompuCell and nanoHUB you have the square that CompuCell lives in and you can drag it around. This is the initial size for that. Then you need to tell nanoHUB where you're hosting stuff. In your case, it's going to be Git repository on GitHub, GitLab, etc. And then the URL for the repository, which is the cloning URL. And in this case, it needs to be the HTTPS one. If I copy that.
It needs to be public. Our product needs to be public.
Yes. Yeah, but again, if you don't want to, yes, your repository needs to be public so that nanoHUB can actually find it and get it there. But as I said, you can change everything in here later, including the contents of main. So you could have an empty CompuCell simulation there until you're okay. And because sure, the tool is not gonna, the tool on nanoHUB is gonna be private until you tell nanoHUB to make it public. But on GitHub, it will be public from now onwards. I mean, there is a way to switch privacy of the repository, but I'm not gonna get into that. So we're telling nanoHUB where to look for stuff. It's Git repository on GitHub. Then we give the cloning HTTPS link there. And it is a Rapture Linux GUI based tool. It's not Jupyter and it's not a sim tool. And then you have here more options for stuff. And the development team is going to be yourself, the people in your group. And I suggest you put me too because that way I can have access to the backend stuff, and I can ask nanoHUB to do stuff as well as you. So makes everyone's life easier in case of problems. And this is the point that I cannot go forward, because nanoHUB is already angry at me for making too many dummy tools. But then you'd click register tool, and you be taken to a, I think you are taken to a landing page change thingy. So you're gonna see something like this. We are waiting for you. So that's nanoHUB telling you to actually get your stuff online. In your case, your code is already online, so you can click the my code is committed, working, and ready to be installed. That's gonna create a ticket for them, and in a day or two, they're based in San Francisco, so take into account the time zone. They're gonna get things online. And you can also create a page to describe your tool. If I go to the CompuCell, or any tool really,
Fast.
go here. Yeah, so let me go over the options again. Tool name must be the same as the one in the script. Title can be anything and can be changed later. Version, same thing. At a glance, a 1-2 sentence abstract that you can change later. You're hosting on GitHUB, so select that as the hosting option. The Git cloning your HTTPS link.
Yes.
And the publishing option is Rapture or Linux GUI, and development team as needed.
Okay, we have to add the things to use then.
And then you can make a landing page for your tool, which would be this. So you have a place for abstract, credits, sponsorship, etc., etc. And there are more zones that you can use, and it's a HTML page, so you can do whatever HTML stuff you want to do. It's probably, I don't think it's HTML5. If I was too bad, I would say it's not, but otherwise you're free to do whatever. And yeah, you can add equations, it supports Greek characters and so on. Okay. Oh yeah, and after you, so you're here, you hit register tool. You're gonna get a page that looks a little bit like this. It's gonna be a bit different. Wait, a little bit like, nope.
So this can go forever to register, I guess, forever register.
Mm-hmm. No, sorry. I wanted to go there. So you're gonna get a page similar to this. You're gonna get some tool information on the left, but the background, I think it's gonna be yellow instead of blue. And instead of saying, I've made changes, please install the latest here, on the right, you're gonna get this. We are waiting for you. Then you click my code is committed, working, please install it. A checklist for when you committed the final version or final version, first published version. A place to create your page. Then you have to test and approve your tool, and after you actually approve your tool, then you make it public. And immediately after hitting the my code is committed, blah, 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 you need to issue a ticket for your tool telling nanoHUB to install the tool in a Debian 10 environment. Yeah. They changed the default environment and they don't have a option anywhere for that. Same question as before. Do you guys want me to repeat the steps?
How long does this registration take? Because it's already 5 minutes or so.
Oh yes, the registration can hang. Things could be fine and things could not be fine at that point if the registration hangs. I just leave the page there thinking. And if you don't get any approval thing afterwards, what you can do is check. So just as the URL for your tool is going to be nanohub.org/tool/short-handle. So in this case, that is nanoHUB tools CC3D base 4X. If I want to check on the status of my tool, which should be easier, there should be, since I own this tool, I should have a button here somewhere to check its status, but I don't see any. So it's CC3, it's nanoHUB tools handle/status. So you could check on that page. And if that page exists, you're fine. If that page doesn't exist, you need to issue nanoHUB a ticket saying, hey, I tried to create a tool using this tool name, the page hung and didn't go anywhere. And then they may say, well, you didn't do that. And you're going to say, yes, I did. And in that case, you just do it again and hope it works. Or they're going to say that you did something wrong and it broke something. And then you say, you didn't do anything wrong. And you fight with them. Yeah. Yep.
Two tools cannot have the same name from anybody who.
Yeah, no two tools can have the same handle. It's part of the URL. Choices. Choices, choices.
That's why they don't like you.
Yeah, that's why they don't like me, because I've created several URLs that don't go anywhere, that they need to host forever. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's their problem.
I know, but.
Okay, it's the same. If you generate a Python package, you know.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I generated as well. So.
Okay. Okay, that's it for nanoHUB. Any questions?
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yep.
So if like our partners and I were all going through these same steps and we all registered a separate tool, is there any way to like combine them, or should we plan on publishing them like the same simulation but as multiple tools? Or is that just
yeah, I probably should have talked about that at the start. Only one person in the group needs to do all of this. Since it is a group project, I mean, there's no sense in having 3 copies of the same thing on nanoHUB. And there's no way to combine them, no.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah.
People could work on the same GitHUB, but that's maybe too advanced.
Yes, and the whole group could and probably should work in the same Git repository. Do learn Git, it's pretty fun. And
it was invented from a very cool person.
And according to Elmer, it was invented by a cool person. That's good to know.
His name is Linus Torvalds.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, so it was created by the Linux guy. Yeah, it's pretty good. Git is pretty good actually. So I'm just gonna show some stuff about Git. Where do I want to go? Probably my repository. So, as James mentioned last week, I'm creating this Python package. And as you can imagine, I made several mistakes and introduced bugs and fixed bugs and so on. Keeping things organized would have been impossible without Git. As you can see, I've made 350 commits. And also, today I'm developing a new feature. I don't really want to change the base of my code with an untested feature. Like I changed my whole cell volume model a couple of times. I shouldn't do that in the working model, because if I do that on a working model, I get it to a non-working model, and maybe I made some mistakes and I want to go back to the previous point. So what you do is you create branches, and so you make your changes on a branch, and after you're happy with your changes, you then put the changes back into the main branch. And afterwards you can delete branches and so on, and you get cool graphs as well. I think they are here. No, where are the cool graphs? Here? No.
Because GitHub is owned by Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
which is as it is.
I think it's network. So you can get your commits, so you're gonna see when you did stuff, which may be useful or not. And here on networks, here it is. We can see where I pulled stuff out of main to create this fork, this branch, or dev even, and where I put stuff into and out of different forks. So let me look for so we can see all the releases. So there is this branch that the last time I did a commit was back in early December, and it's stale there. So to do stuff here, I need to update it and then put it back. Let's see. So this branch, it's got the same branch. So yeah, you can see how things were done and stuff. Okay. So here, fixing, so I did some refactor. I broke things and I needed to fix them. And we can see that there was a lot of development in this branch, and every so often I put it back into dev. Yeah, that's pretty cool and useful. More useful than it seems. Okay, so if there are no questions before we jump to the next subject, I propose we take the break now. Okay, so it's 6:03 on my watch. So I'll see you back at 6:15. I think everybody is here or thereabouts. So we can switch to the second topic of tonight or this evening. Running batches of CC3D simulations and changing parameters in those batches. So CompuCell is a stochastic simulator. So every time you run it, things are going to be a bit different. which means that for every single simulation, you can't know if your result is representative of your simulation. So you need to run 5, 10, 20 replicates of the simulation to get a better feel for how things are going. On top of that, you probably want to explore parameters. So in the end, you end up having hundreds or thousands of simulations that you have to run, which, as you've noticed, is not really feasible on your computer. I mean, you can run your number of cores minus 1 simulation at a time and still be somewhat fine, but your computer is going to be unusable. And depending on your computer, it's going to take forever. Thankfully, IU has high performance computers where you can run stuff. And you can set up your CompuCell simulation to use that facilities and to set up automatic scanning of parameters and so on. And as an example, on my remdesivir model, one thing that happened was that with the initial conditions that I was using at first, a lot of the times the simulations were kind of wasted because remdesivir is treatment for COVID. And for the initial conditions, sometimes I only started with 1 infected cell, and sometimes that single infected cell was killed almost immediately by the immune system or some other random factor. So that drove me into a situation where I had to find better initial conditions, but I would never have seen that if I had run only 1 replicate. I ran, I think at first it was 10 or so simulations, and I saw that once, and then I ran 400 replicates. And then I saw that the problem was pretty big. I think there was a 10%-ish chance that the initially infected cell would just die almost immediately or soon after, and the simulation would be pretty useless. So I found a better initial condition and went from there. But I would never have seen that if I had ran just 1 simulation or even just 5. So speaking of, so why scan parameters? Another thing that I had there was, well, I had to find the proper initial condition. So I was starting with 1, but I also scanned for starting with 2, with 5, with 10 infected cells, and I reached a conclusion on a proper situation. I also had to scan other parameters. I was testing different remdesivir schedules, so the periodicity in between remdesivir doses was another parameter that I had to scan. I was also scanning how potent remdesivir is, and so on. So if you're doing research, you need to scan parameters. So steps, again, almost the same number of steps as nanoHUB. Well, 1, get on one of IU's HPC systems, which was part of homework. Get Conda locally and there going. Create an environment for CC3D installation on the HPC. So then install Mamba through Conda, because the Conda version in Carbonate at least is somewhat outdated, and it has a bug that it throws an overflow error if you try to install CompuCell. And Conda in general is a good package manager, but it is slow to the point that you can see interesting discussions about it online. And somebody got fed up with it and made Mamba, which is a Python package that you can install through Conda, and is also a Python manager, but you use Conda to use it. And then we are going to use Mamba to install CompuCell, which doesn't have the bug and works faster anyway. Then we have another GitHub repository template to fork and use as base. Clone that repository, place your simulations in that repository. Then we're gonna find the Python that has CC3D in the HPC environment. We are gonna change a few variables in the batch execution script, make changes to the simulation file to actually use the batch execution script, make changes to the batch exec_py, which defines the parameter scan and where to put the output, etc. Put all the changes online, clone everything to the HPC environment, and finally run. Okay, so 1, getting into HPC. Switch to share. If you're on a Unix system, i.e. Linux or Mac, you most likely already have SSH in your terminal. If you're on Windows, I recommend PuTTY as your SSH manager. And even if you're not on Windows, I recommend PuTTY or some other SSH manager. Otherwise, you need to remember all the links to do SSH and so on. In here, I have Carbonate saved, and it has my stuff there. So I don't need to remember that to log into Carbonate, I want to SSH into carbonate.uits.iu.edu. Let's put that in chat regardless. So if I do open here, where did it go? Up there. So, and login is IU login, and you have Duo as well. There. Okay. So you can see in the welcome message that I am in Carbonate. And if it is your first time SSH into Carbonate, it's gonna throw a warning saying, hey, I don't recognize this place from before. Do you want to add it to known places? Yes, it's fine. But don't go SSHing into random IPs that you get from the internet. Then we need to get Conda going. I already have it, but to get it loaded up, you do module load Anaconda. Anaconda, and it gets loaded. As we can see, it's the 2020 version, so it's a bit old. And you can see what other modules are available in Carbonate. So is Carbonate not reachable for some people, or? Okay. But you can see what modules you have loaded up already with module list. And you can see all the available ones. I can't remember exactly how, but it is listed on Carbonate's website. But maybe module available? Yep, module available. The module list is what you have loaded. Available is what you can load. And you can see that there's a lot of things. Yep. Okay, so I have Conda, and I know I have Conda loaded up because I see base here. So that's telling me that I'm in the base environment for Anaconda. And one thing that you may want to do is have some modules load up by default in Carbonate, and maybe unload some by default as well. And you can do that by changing the modules file. So you have a hidden file, period modules, on your home directory. And if you type in your load and unload commands in that file, you can have it be automatic. So I have Conda by default loaded up in my Carbonate, but that's not needed. Just something that you can do if you want to. Okay. So similarly to Git, where it's interesting to make different branches to not break things, in Anaconda is even more interesting to create environments to install your packages. You may have packages that conflict with each other, and you try to install one, and it breaks another without realizing, or it doesn't work. So then you create another environment to install the package that wasn't working before, and so on. And if you break something on the Anaconda environment, the break is going to be limited to that environment, and it's not going to break your whole Python, which would be bad, as you can imagine, which is the issue with using pip instead of Conda. So to create a environment, the command is conda create -n for name. And then the name of the environment, I'm gonna call it CC3D. I already have an environment named CC3D. You can probably use that, it's shorter. So in my case, I'm gonna do CC3D Spring 23. I'll give you all the command. We see a message from Conda saying that it's collecting data, solving an environment and creating, and as you can see, it's quite slow, even though it is an empty environment. Finally, it pops up the message saying, hey, when I do this, and a warning about the version being quite outdated. So I'm gonna say yes. Now I have the new environment. So I can switch to that environment with Conda. No, I tried to update Conda. So to switch, it's Conda activate CC3D. Oh. That environment be empty. And now I can see that it changed from base here to the name of my environment. All good so far? Should I repeat steps? There is a way to list what packages you have installed, but I can never remember the conda commands by heart. On the list something. On the list. So you can see that it's going to be empty. So it's not even going to have, yeah, it's not even going to have Python because I didn't install Python. And actually, yeah, it was conda list. Should pay attention to my terminal. Packages in environment at blah, blah, blah. So now we already know where the environment is. So on my user Carbonate, the hidden folder conda ends, and then the environment name, and we see that it is empty. So first things first, to install Mamba. So to install stuff in Conda is Conda install -c lists the channels that Conda should look at. And for Mamba, it's going to be Conda Forge. Then the list of packages, you can do more than one package at once. In my case, I'm just going to do Mamba. And I'm putting in a -y at the end because I'm just going to have to type, say, yes, I want to install this later. So the -y says yes when that comes. Yeah, well, small y. You see that it's collecting data, solving environment, blah, blah, blah. Again, the warning about the version. And we can see that it's okay. It's not too slow, but when you're doing several packages at once, it can be quite slow. And since Mamba needs Python, it probably got installed here somewhere.
Yeah. Not like nanoHUB has species.
Yeah. So I guess around, yeah, I think the question of how are you sure you want to do this would have been before this step. But we can see that it actually takes a little while for other things to get installed. And it's only one package. And I think Mamba is not a big package. And that's why when we do CompuCell, which is going to be way bigger, we are going to carry on where things are going instead of waiting. Yep, if your Mamba has finished, you have the command there. Instead of being Conda install, it's Mamba install. Mamba install -c Conda Forge, so channel Conda Forge, -c again, CompuCell3D for the CompuCell channel. Then CompuCell3D equals 43 through 2 for the most recent one. It's single backslash because to be code formatted. So the quotes here is just to tell you that it is a command, but you don't need it. So I'm gonna put it in chat now. Remember, stone. Look in the Conda Forge channel because CompuCell has several dependencies there. Then look at the CompuCell3D channel and install CompuCell3D.
Nice splash.
And the splash for Mamba is way nicer than Conda,
Yeah.
and it's way faster.
I only want splash.
So that's the Mamba command. Mambda.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
There we go.
Oh. Pin package, she cannot work with Python 3.11.
There we go.
Break.
Will it?
Yeah, because it's Python 3.11. So
Yeah. Yeah, so
so then quote smaller 3.11 and then you will take the you have 3.10.
yeah. Okay, so I think a way around that is to do.
So Python.
Yep. So we are gonna tell Mamba to both install Python, even though it's installed, and CompuCell3D, because since Python in a Python environment is pretty big, let's say, or a VIP, it's not gonna touch Python. But if we tell it to install Python and CompuCell, it's gonna touch Python to fit CompuCell's requirements. Okay, so now we can carry on. It's in chat if you need the comment.
I don't have check.
Okay. So while that's going, I think it's working now. Can talk about parameter scan. So CC3D actually has a built-in parameter scan, which you're free to use, but it is not trivial to add it to a simulation. The syntax is strange, and if you do not want to run a parameter scan, it's near impossible to get rid of it. So it's going to be similar to what we do. The inbuilt parameter scan uses a JSON file where you list parameters, and then in Python and XML you do double curly brackets parameter name, and then it's going to look in the JSON file for the value. But let's not bother with that, because we have created a different parameter scan when we are doing COVID, not the remdesivir one, the one before. It's easier to use, easier to not use when you don't want it. It works by defining a dictionary instead of a JSON file, so tomato, tomato. And it organizes the outputs in a better way, in my opinion. So when you use the parameter scan here, each combination of parameters is called a set, and each simulation replicate is called a run. So the way this gets organized in the way is that on your output folder, you get a set 0. So it would be the first parameters here. And in there, you get all the runs that use that first combination of parameters. Then you get set 1, which uses the second combination of parameters. So it would be the second parameter here and the first two here, and all the runs that use that, and so on. It sweeps through the lists of parameters, which can be NumPy arrays too, any iterable, I guess, and organizes things. And you do need to make some.
Can be in several sets.
No, so for set 0, which uses alpha 0.1, beta 0.1, and number 2, all of the runs using that combination are going to be in set 0. But say you want 10 replicates using those parameters to make sure that you know what is going on.
So only the alpha, yeah.
Then run 0 is going to be the first run of with set 0. Run 1 is going to be the second run of set 0, all the way to run n, which is how many replicates you asked for, -1. 0 indexing, ain't it fun? And yeah, so you define a dictionary with, and some other particularities is that your parameters shouldn't be in the steppables file. You need to create a separate file for the parameters, which is good practice anyway. And in that separate parameter file, you need to have a dictionary called __paramdesk __. And the keys of that dictionary are the names of your parameters. So here I have alpha as a string, and alpha equals a number. And the value of the dictionary is an optional description. It can be an empty string, but it needs to be there. And that's because the script will look up the parameters by name. So the keys need to match and so on. Few minor particularities that we are going to get into. So how to get this batch execution stuff? Well, of course, GitHub, as usual. So let me get there. Here. So I have this other repository, CC3D batch template. And once again, you're gonna, well, in this case, you don't need to use this template. I guess you could clone it directly and copy files over and blah, 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 but both methods should work. So use this template, create a new repository, and I'm gonna call it Spring 23. Probably don't want to use the foam example. Let me do something here. On the activate. I'm gonna use the mitosis that we did in class. You probably know where yours is saved. I don't actually remember. So Spring 23, mit for mitosis, batch. I hit enter, that's all fine. There we go. It's cloned. And while I look for simulation I want, I'm going to clone this. Same as before, code, HTTPS or SSH, whatever works. Got the link there. Oof. And I'm gonna go back to C Spring 23, git clone. Nope, not copy. There we go. One there. Where is Reddit? Nope. Where did Reddit go? Not sure where my Reddit went. Anyway, let me search for it.
Actually, see that trouble to install the Lombard comments about.
Well, okay. I'm gonna another simulation here. That should be fine. Okay, so I've cloned things here. That's well and good. and I can see that it is there. See that there's a bunch of stuff there. Here I am. And now I'm gonna place my model in the models folder. So if I do a ls again, you can see that there is a folder there. And let me navigate there, and here. And there is actually already an example there that uses all of this stuff if you want a reference. But I'm gonna copy this other one. Zoom is getting in my way, which is the one that I created for the creating a single cell simulation. And for some reaon, to edit is not working. Okay. So I'm gonna, add that there. You can use the mitosis example we've been using in class or any other you want from class. And for things to work smoothly, there needs to be a init file in the simulation folder. This file can be completely empty. It's just to tell Python that it should treat this as a package. So that file is 100% empty, just for Python's sake. So I'm just gonna copy that here, and also inside simulation, which may be needed, maybe not, I'm not sure. And now if I go back to Git and do a git status, we can see that there is a new folder there, model single cell. So git and model single cell. Git status again. Bunch of new files. Git commit, adding my model. And git push. Does that make sense so far? I mean, we got Conda going in the HPC here. So we loaded up Conda, created a new environment, switched that environment, installed Mamba, which is somewhere. Yep, install Mamba. Then we installed CompuCell, which we used Mamba instead of Conda, and we told Mamba to first look at the Conda Forge channel, then at the CC3D channel, and we told it to reinstall Python, downgrade it if needed, upgrade it if needed, and CompuCell.
And actually, we have this. It is 1 equal sign or 2 equal sign to the version.
1.
1. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's CompuCell3D equals 432. It's not equals. I could you choose another version. I'm trying to remember when was Conda added. I think 2.3 would also work, but I'm not gonna waste time on that. Then we came back into GitHub to the batch template repository. We created a new repository from there, cloned it locally, and added the our simulation files to the cloned repository under models, and then it's the model. And motion is already there as an example that you can use. Then we added all the changes. So the single cell folder, it was just a simulation that I have in my computer, and it was just Control-C, Control-V to the other place. So I have it here. And you can use any of the simulations we used in class. The mitosis ones, for instance. And yeah, I just copied that over and then came back here. I did a git status just to see what was there, and I saw that indeed the folder was there. Then I added the changes to git. So git add model single cell. I could do git add period for this folder or git add star for everything. All would work. But it's better practice to just add file by file or folder by folder. Don't want unneeded changes. Did another git status, again, just to check on things. We saw this. Then I created the commit and pushed. So the important verbs in Git, and I think to get Git, the important thing is to pay attention to the verbs. Clone, you're creating a new repository locally from something online. Push, you're pushing local changes to the origin or online. Adding changes. Commit, you're actually committing the changes. Then there's a few others that we haven't really used. There is diff for difference, to check the difference. And when you make changes in one computer and are working on another computer, you have to pull, well, first you need to fetch what changes were made to the repository. And then you pull those changes from the origin to your local machine. So yeah, to get Git, you need to get the verbs. And it's pretty simple. The start is kind of confusing, but is easy to after you start using it. Okay, so the model is there. And now we need to make some changes. By now, the installation in the HPC should have finished, which indeed, at least for me, did. Huh. Oh, okay. And now we need to actually find where we need to tell our batch execution later where Python is and which Python to use. So and we're gonna change that on the shell script locally later. Okay, but let me go through the script. We are gonna choose the parameters we're using batch exec py, but the thing we are gonna run later in the HPC is batch exec sh. And that needs to know where Python is. So if I go here, no. If I go here, no. Here. If I go here and open up batch exec sh. We can see that it is looking for where CCD is installed. So root directory of your CCD installation. And also where Python is installed, which locally in your machine can be different places. Carbonate At least for me, last week, it was the same place. Your mileage may vary. And I already know that, well, Conda is in its own hidden folder called Conda. And, well, look at that. There is a folder there called ENVs, so it's probably there. And yes, I have 3 environments there. And the one that I created today is CC3D Spring 23. So if I look in there, then I can see there's a bunch of stuff. And yeah. Yeah. And there is this bin folder, and I looked for it last week, and there's where the Python executable and CompuCell's executable are. So if I actually change my directory to .conda envs cc3d spring bin, let me try to find it in this huge list. I'm probably not going to be able to. But we can see Mamba here.
I installed Mamba, but it's a report, how to send command and now everything.
So where is CompuCell? A, B, here, CC3D. You can see that there. And this is actually the main script for CC3D. Not that it matters to us. And then Python. Yeah, Python. There's Python too. Cool. So now in this file, we need to tell it to look into this folder. And it's better to do a full path to the absolute path to the directory, because then it doesn't matter where you place your stuff in your Carbonate environment later. So we need to know what is the full path to here, because right now we know the relative path. We are in my home directory, conda and blah, 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 blah. But if I do a parent working directory, pwd, I got the full path.
But it might be a symbolic thing.
It's not.
So you need to things.
Okay, so Elmar is saying that the correct thing would be to do this. But the symbolic link works because I didn't know that and I used the first one and it worked.
Yeah.
So do not do the -p, pwd.
Elmar is bad.
Yes, Elmar is bad. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy this and place it in the batch exec sh in the prefix cc3d variable and the Python install path variable. Save that. All good? Should I step back a little bit? Cool. So that's done. So now the batch execution will know where Python is later. And that's a problem for later. So now we need to actually add those changes. So if I do a git status, you see that batch exec is there in red, for there are changes that are not being added yet. And now I'm gonna add those changes with git add batch exec. commit those changes with git commit -m changing environment variables. Verbose messages are good. And if I do a git status again, oh, should have done the git status before the commit. Now that the changes are committed, it doesn't show anything, but it shows that my branch is ahead of origin by one commit, which is good. And now to get those changes actually online, I'm going to do a git push. For my passphrase as usual. That's there. And if I go back here and do a refresh, you can see that where it said that there was one commit, now it says there is 3. Interesting. I thought it would be 2, but whatever. And we see that next to batch exec, my message shows. And if I look in here, I'll also see that, again, it's not executable, which we'll deal with later. And we see that the paths are correct. I guess the git and whatever lose the execution permission for safety reasons. I mean, you don't want to enable viruses. But anyway. Okay, so we found where Python and CompuCell are installed, added the told batch exec where to look later, and pushed all those changes online. So now we can go to changing our simulation. For some reason, Twedit still hasn't opened here. I'm gonna try to force close it and get it open again. That doesn't work. I have an alternative. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Fine. So I'm gonna go to my preferred Python editor, PyCharm, instead of Twedit. And if anybody wants to couple CC3D with proper IDE, be it PyCharm or something else, you can come to office hours and we can do that. No. I can show how to do it for a non-masochistic IDE, and then you can try to do it in Vim. Okay. Okay, so PyCharm is opening up here.
Actually, is this X11 running with X11?
Yes, I could. Yes, I guess I could. But I don't even think I don't know if Carbonate has X11.
Well, no, but it should.
Let me. Something's getting in my way. Always on. No.
make this new file in the same directory?
Oh, right. Yes. So you're going to create this new file in the folder that has the steppables file. And now my laptop is going to suffer a little bit because I have Zoom and this opened at the same time, which is not going to like, but it's going to have to deal with it. That's why I wanted to use to edit and not this. Fine. I guess I could use Notepad++. Yeah, let's do that.
Is there a specific name?
No, the parameter file can have any name. You just need to remember it later. Okay, so let me just close all of this. Okay. Cool. So I have the repository here, and I have my model under models, single cell in my case, then simulation. So I'm going to copy that here, and I'm going to create a new file, or let's save this new file, I guess. Will allow me to save now. Thank you. There. And you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to call it cell inputs. .py. And let me open this. Yes. Open this here. Okay, so this is a really simple example that I had online. With the mitosis, you're going to have more options for parameters like at what volume should the cell divide, or what should be the initial volume of the cell. You can set up flags for doing or not doing plots. You can set flags for saving data or not. You can set flags to do the different types of mitosis that you've probably seen there. Has random orientation along a specific axis, major, minor along a specific vector that you set, and so on. In my case, I only really have one parameter to play with. Well, three: the initial position of the cell and the initial size of the cell. So in my case, I'm gonna just change the size of the cell. So in here, I'm gonna create the parameter description dictionary, which has to have this name, param_desc. Like so. Where's Zoom chat now? So that creates a empty dictionary. And now I will actually give it some inputs. So param_desc, then some key and a description. So my key is going to be side. And the description is going to be initial side length of the cell in pixels. And then I need to match exactly the key for the parameter name and give it a value. I had 8 in the other file, so I'm going to use 8 again. Then there are a couple of things that we need to do in here, the actual stepables. So for the inputs, I just created one. You can do whatever, and you don't need to add a description. You can just have a empty string like so. That is also fine. But I think it needs to be a string. And it needs to be there. So in the stepables file, first, I'm going to import a couple more packages. OS for operating system and getting all the fun stuff that your operating system can do, and sys for system. Oh, and I should, okay. And now, instead of having to copy all of that by hand, I'm gonna remember that I have the other example here in motion. And I'm gonna open that stepables file. And I'm gonna copy stuff from here because I'm smart. So I'm gonna add all of that to here. So all of these are adding paths to the simulation so that it knows where to import stuff. Then this is what will be used to change the parameters. And this is some extra stuff. And here, finally, I'm importing my inputs. But here it says Unicell model inputs, but that's not the parameter file that I created. The parameter file that I created is cell inputs. So I'm just gonna change that to cell inputs. Oops, no, there. And to get all of this, except the import OS and import sys, I went to the example that exists in the repository. Which is models motion, opened the stepables file and copied everything after the import, well, from import project onwards. Making sense? Should I take a step back? Cool.
So do you have as many simulations as you want inside this repository?
Yes. As many models as you want, yeah. Then yes, you can have, I should probably repeat the question for the people online. You can have as many models as you want in here. And then the way we are gonna select them is gonna be in the batch exec.py file later on. So from this line onwards, I have all the contents of this file available here as they are. So I have a side variable, and it is global. So instead of having size equals 8, I'm going to replace that by size equals site. And if you have other parameters like what volume the cell should divide, you'd use there that where needed, etc., etc. So for instance, here in the example that is in there, it's importing the inputs. And then because I got the simulation first, and then it's actually setting those inputs here to a couple of class variables. And those get used later on And it's a bit convoluted with a bunch of double declarations because it was a simulation that already existed that I made work with this. So if you already have a self dot something defined in your start or init, you can keep using that without having to change the self dot whatever everywhere. You just do this sort of thing. Cool. Okay, so oh yeah, so the final change in the steppables file is to do this part here. So in the first steppable that is registered in your model, you need to do that call. So something that I don't think we have gone over in class really, but in your simulation file, there is the steppables Python file, which you've used a lot, but there is this other mysterious Python file, which is the same sort of file name, but without the steppables. And that Python file is referred as the main Python file in the manuals and elsewhere. And if we look in here, we see that it is importing the steppable class from here, single cell steppable class, import single cell steppable. And then it's registering that steppable with CompuCell, and then it's calling the run. And if you have many steppables, you would have many imports here. You'd have from single cell steppables, import stepable 1, stepable 2, etc., and many register calls. So if you ever want to remove a steppable, you need to remove it here. And that also means you can reorder how the order of steppable execution, because CompuCell does all the spin flips, and then it looks at the list of registered steppables and calls them sequentially. So if you're doing some complicated stuff, and I have never seen this be the case, you may want to reorder the calls of the steppables. But that does mean that for this batch execution to work properly, the following change we're going to make needs to be to the first registered steppable. So the first steppable that gets passed to this call in the main Python file. And that change is to actually call the parameter change. So in the init function of the first called steppables, we are gonna import the, and this is somewhat convoluted, but it is what it is. We are gonna import the inputs file again. And we are gonna use batch run lib, a method of batch run lib on that file. So it is batch run lib applies external multipliers underscore underscore name underscore underscore, which I think is the name of the current file, and then the inputs. And this is all very convoluted, but believe you me, this is better than the default parameter scan of CompuCell. And sure, it's convoluted now, but from this point onwards, it's not. We're through the hill. Okay, and now we again need to add all of the changes. So if I do a git status, and feel free to stop me and whatever. Oh yeah, PyCharm created that idea folder. I do have a git. So let me just do. So one cool thing with Git, you have a git ignore file, which tells Git to ignore stuff. So I thought I was telling it to ignore idea, but it's still there.
Here we have a token from the
But it is here too.
show up. Yeah.
Nope.
And it is black. Or maybe a star behind the idea.
Is the one?
Yeah. Source idea and /star, and where is this ID folder? It's in the main there, in the main. It's on your
Main
from
repo.
the
Yeah.
repo. Right on idea /star. Yeah. So
Hmm.
in this case, maybe because it's,
Well,
have you say it?
good, and
The right one?
no. Anyway, doesn't matter. And this is why it's better to not do git add period or star. So I'm gonna do a git add models.
I think the problem is that you already have files that
Yeah.
are in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can reset to unadd.
Git recent idea. Okay. Okay. Looks good. And if I do a git, well, whatever. I'm not gonna fuss about the idea folder. Doesn't matter. Okay, so I've added the changes to models. And if I do a git commit -m, getting simulation ready. And git push. Cool. All good so far? Okay. Cool. Now we can actually start changing the git, the batch exec by. So we already looked at batch exec sh. That's done. Now we can look at batch exec by. Here it is. So we already have some stuff here for the example that is there already. And this file defines what is the input file, where the output should be, how many simulation replicates should be run for each combination, and so on. The parameter scan is defined with the multdict dictionary, which is already set up for the example there. But I'm gonna change it to something else. I'm gonna create a new dictionary called single cell. And it's only gonna have one parameter in this simulation, but in your case, it's probably gonna be more. So to create a dictionary of something, that's the syntax. And the key should match the keys in parameter description in the input file. Close that here, put that there. And then I'm gonna list sizes for the cell that I want to use.
But I still have, I mean, you put your model into this model folder. But most probably your model will be another Git repo, and you cannot put the Git repo into a Git repo. So
yes, so Elmer is talking about you already have your model in another Git repo, and you can't put a repo in a repo, and that's all true. So I made this into a repo to be easier, but what you can do instead of using this is just copy these 3 folders plus these and place that into your repo, your actual model tool repo or whatever. Yep, root. And then only thing that is going to change is here, how you're inputting stuff, which I was going to get to later.
okay, I'm gonna try that.
Yep.
Could you take a screenshot? I don't know which folder. Take the
Yep.
one sent me is okay, so backward.
Well, all of the folders,
Without the license, we remove
well,
that.
not the, well, all of the folders except models, the PY files and the SH files.
Of course, yeah, the battery license. Yeah, okay, good, yeah, get it.
Yep,
We'll do that.
simple enough. Okay, so back here, creating a new dictionary for the single cell simulation. Key matches the input here. And I'm actually going to change this to 1 in the cell inputs. We're going to see why later. And in here, I'm going to set my parameter scan. So the way this works is by applying these values not as direct values, but as multipliers. So, and this was all done during the peak COVID, so we made choices fast. If we look here, we can see that the batch run lib call is apply external multipliers. That gives you a hint of how things are done. So it's going to get whatever value is here in cell inputs, and it's going to multiply it by the values that you define here in this list. So I'm going to have a few multiplicative values. I set it to 1 to make my life easier. So this is the same as using this direct value. So 4, 6, 8. I guess 10 is the next. 12. That's good enough. That's going to give me 5 values. Then I'm going to set the multi-dig to single cell. Yes, I could do this directly here. But one limitation of Carbonate is that you can only have 400 simulations in the queue at once. So it's useful to break things down into manageable dictionaries. So it's easier to have different dictionaries defined first and then just point multi-dig to the correct one. Then you can set the number of replicates here, as many as you like, as long as it is less than 400 divided by the length of all of the combinations of parameters you have, which it is combinatorial. So up here, it would be 18 parameters. So I could do 20 replicates at once for this dictionary. Don't worry about these. They don't change anything. Just leave this one as one. Then you can set where you want your output to be, which you have some space in Carbonate, but it is somewhat limited. So you probably want to use Slate, which is I use big storage unit, and you need to make an account for that. So you change that here, but I'm gonna do my home directory in Carbonate for now. So I'm just gonna go there and get the path to that. Put that there, and class example. And then in here is where you define, where you tell batch exec, what are your model inputs files. So in my case, it is from models, oops, models. No. So I need to set that up. That's why I prefer PyCharm. Models, single cell. So the way to know where you're importing from is the same as the folders, but instead of being backslashes, it's periods. That's Python. Very convenient programming language. So just paste it there and replace the backslash with a dot. Then import. And it was single cell.py, but I didn't get it here. There. And for complicated models, you may have several input files because you may have steppables in several different steppable files too. That was the case for COVID. So you then have to list the input modules in input modules. Yeah. And finally, we register the input module with batch run lib, which again is verbose and decisions that were made during peak COVID. Now we live with them there. So what I did was I changed the output folder to be somewhere in my Carbonate place, and it doesn't need to exist. There's 2 lines created if it's not there. Then I'm importing the input file. I'm listing it in input modules. And then in batch run lib register auto inputs, I'm giving it a string which matches the from import statement. Does that make sense? Not? Please say so.
Why you need the VT2
Yeah, so VTK is how CompuCell actually stores the lattice.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's why this out frequency should be high, because that's gonna tell CompuCell how often it should save the VTKs. And VTKs are an image, but it is a 3D image. So you have as many pixels in the VTK file as you do on CompuCell. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of pixels and therefore a lot of disk space. So keep that high. You can make that even higher if you want. Okay, that's all done. I've already mentioned how things are organized, and we're Gonna see that soon. And now we can actually configure the job for carbonate. So we are getting the configuration templates by default from here. And
So
we,
this means every 250 Monte Carlo steps it makes saves.
Yep. Yeah, so the 250 is saying that every 250 Monte Carlo steps is saving the VTK. So for the configuration template, it's again a dictionary. And there are more keys than these, but these are the ones that matter. So JN is for job name, give it a string. WALH is for wall time, hours of wall time you want. WM is for minutes of wall time you want. And Carbonate had a message at the start that said that maximum wall time was 4 days now. Then PPN is how many jobs should be run in a single node. So keep it 8. I think Carbonate nodes are 8 cores, so that should be fine. And a VMEM is how much memory your simulation requires in gigabytes. So the higher you make AWH and VMEM, the lower in the priority queue you're going to be. So try to find out how long your simulation takes on Carbonate with a dry run and ask for that ×2 to be safe and get ahead in the queue. And I think, yes, I think that's it for the batch exec py file. So again, we're gonna go back to GitHub and push all the changes online. There is some changing the cell inputs file, and I don't remember doing anything there. So I'm gonna do a git diff that file. Oh yeah, I did change the default side from 8 to 1. So I'm gonna add that, and I'm gonna make a commit just for that. Good practice. Changing default parameter. And now I'm gonna add the batch exec. Git commit -m. Scan out. Job configurations. And git push. Okay, and if I do a git status, I should see that things are up to date. Your branch is up to date with origin main. All good? We're almost done. And pretty perfectly in time, considering that the class ends at 7:45. Should I go back to something? Everything's fine? Okay. We are done, almost. Now we need to actually get all of that jazz in Carbonate. And that's why we are using GitHub, because Carbonate has GitHub. And so you don't need to do weird SCP, SSP? SCP. Yeah.
It's not weird, it's great.
I mean, yes, it's great, works, but Git is easier. So if I do Git here, aha, it exists. So I am on my home directory, I guess. Yes, correct. Perfect. So I'm gonna go back to the repository here. And if I do a refresh, I'm gonna see all of the new commits that we did. 6 commits in total. And we see everything there, blah, blah, blah. So now I go to code, and now I do have to use the HTTPS version because I haven't set up my Git account properly in Carbonate, and do a git clone and that link. Enter. And then there it is. So now if I do a change here, well, actually, let's do that. So if I do, let me just go here. Anyway, it looks like I didn't save some stuff.
Hello.
Which is good for this example. Git add match exact.py. So I'm gonna break a rule and place in a bad commit message, but it's late. And now if I go back to Carbonate, where there is a change, and I could do a git fetch first, I see that there was a change there. And now I do a git pull. And I see that it copied over the changes. And now we can actually run. Can you believe it? Precisely in time. And to run, it's real simple. Period slash. Ah, yes. So the batch exec does not have run permissions, as we forgot. But I can either do stuff locally, push it online on Git, blah, 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 blah. Or I can just do chmod, what was it? Plus equals x batch exec dot sh directly on Carbonate. And now if I do an lsl, here it is. You can see that it has run permissions, but it lost the other ones. Huh, interesting. Not sure why. Okay, there we go. So period slash batch exec run. Now it's setting things up and it's gonna queue stuff, hopefully. Ah, okay, yep, cool, it worked. Complain about some stuff, but it's there. So we see that it created a bunch of, well, it created a temporary folder, a bunch of scripts, and submitted batch jobs. So now when it gives me that command, there we go. We can actually see my jobs with sq-u for a user. Well, if I do a dash sq only, we see all of the jobs that are queued or running in Carbonate, which is not really useful for me. And I know who did something, so I knew that Saventu, whoever they are, did something wrong. So if I do a sq-u and my username, now I can see my stuff. And I can see that the status is that it is queued. And it is in the priority queue, it looks like. And after it starts to run, I'm gonna see the runtime there. One good thing that you can do is watch sq-u. That's gonna keep issuing that command every 2 seconds by default. You can change that default to something else. So the watch command in Linux is very useful. It just keeps reissuing the same command. So if you do watch --n 60, it's gonna do it every 60 seconds instead of every 2 seconds, which is the default. And if you can pipe the results from SQ to a line counter and get the direct number of jobs you're running instead of having to figure out, which is useful when you issue 400 at a time. So you're not sure if they're finished or how many are running and so on.
That's easy. That's it.
Yeah. Watch number jobs. Yes. Yeah. Too bad that my jobs haven't run. I guess we are on a busy time for Carbonate. Because I wanted to show the output. But maybe that's created already. What did I, oh, there, in class. Precise. Yeah, so it created all of the sets 0 through 4. And in here you have all the runs, and the parameters for that run are in the CSV file. So you can reference back later. Yeah, there it is. Cool, that's it for today. Thank you all for coming. Any final questions before we wrap up? Not, I'll see you next week. If you have any questions, feel free to join the office hours on Friday. Bye.